Russians' drone attack, 650 drone attacks and 51 missiles overnight in different infrastructure. I just want to know, sir, from you, how might widespread infrastructure damage over winter affect Ukrainian civilian moral and social resilience?
Well, I think that we have to look at the Ukrainians as real heroes who have stood up to a superpower and have not blinked, even now. I think that most of the people still Slava Ukraine. They want to see victory. They want to see some freedom for their country. They want to maintain their sovereignty. And I don't think that they are prepared to concede the territory willingly to Russia. It may come to pass, but that's not on their agenda. I think that, as Norman has said many times in the past, we're facing an upcoming winter which is very, very severe in Ukraine. And the lack of electricity and the lack of power and the provision of heating is going to affect people's morale, no question about that. But we're seeing that Russia is trying to establish the conditions precedent to a ceasefire agreement or some sort of a peace agreement by trying to show that they cannot be stopped, that they are the superior power, that it is not really a negotiation for peace, it's a concession and a surrender by Ukraine.
What is the takeaway of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner after meeting Vladimir Putin in Moscow? They have gone to Washington.
Yeah, well, of course, those guys are all about money. And they don't go there to talk diplomacy. If you're going to talk diplomacy, you send Rubio. You talk money, you send Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. This is all about what the United States can get out of this from Russia after the dust settles, so to speak. But let me catch up with a couple of your other comments, okay? One, India is trying to become like a big player in the game. This will fail. I mean, there's no question that by tomorrow morning, Narendra Modi is going to get slapped upside the head by the State Department and by Donald Trump personally. You don't promise to buy fuel from Russia in the middle of this war and think you're not going to suffer the consequences. So the tariff will be like 1,000,000% on India. I mean, the United States is not going to put up with this sort of adventurism by some small little potato like him. Forget it. The second thing is that you talk about, and we talk about, NATO and EU as if it was a monolith. But each individual country in that group has to find their own way. Norman brings this up in a nice way. I listened to the Prime Minister of Finland talking about the 1,000-kilometer border he has with Russia. His needs and his policies are different than Spain. So the closer you are to the poison, the more difficult and important it is for you to have a separate foreign policy. So Germany has a foreign policy that's based upon their own self-interest. They're trying hard to separate themselves from Russia. Same with France and even in the UK. Some of the other smaller players like Italy are sort of watching from the sides, but they're involved in the group consensus, but they suffer disproportionately. Each one of them suffers disproportionately, whether it's NATO or whether it's Europe, the EU. And so they can work together, of course, and they do, but I mean, the impact on countries like Moldova and Finland and even like his friend in Belarus, those countries are facing a disproportionate risk from dealing in this war and not coming to the aid of Ukraine. Ukraine loses, everybody loses, but in a different way.
Absolutely. If Ukraine loses, NATO loses, European countries loses, and
in a different way.
States
each one loses differently.
Will be under question, sir. It's absolutely a dire situation in Ukraine going on. Washington Post has done a summary on this issue. They say this assault might galvanize wider international support for Ukraine and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, potentially resulting in increased aid and a stronger diplomatic backing by Washington Post. On the other side, Wall Street Journal has written like this: public exposure of civilian infrastructure attacks might raise global pressure on Russia to reconsider its tactics or face sanctions and isolation. I think new problems are arising for Russia as well.
Yeah, but then you have this guy Modi who's trying to make a deal with Russia, a pariah state, that he's going to buy their fuel, which was like totally restricted by the United States policy while sanctions were imposed. But we'll let that play out as a sort of a regional dynamic. We can have fun watching that, okay? Listen, if Russia does not come out on top and is seen to be weak, this opens the real door for China to become their backbone. This would frighten the United States to see China becoming ascendant on account of their losses in Ukraine. And so that's why you might explain the United States flip-flop on their policy. They were strongly Ukraine, providing weapons and so forth, but now all of a sudden they seem to be wanting to accommodate some of the things that Russia is demanding. The Donbass, for example, that they want that to be Russian territory again. Other concessions that they're shooting for as well. And so this shift in policy by the United States that seems to be more pro-Russian, or at least weak on Ukraine, can be looked at through the lens of maybe this is a sort of a play that keeps China at bay. That if Russia becomes weaker, China becomes stronger. And that may be an alternative that the United States doesn't want to face.
Media is also suffering its freedom to expression.
You call Hong Kong a country,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Yes. So let us move into the Gaza and Israel issue. In an enclave of Gaza Strip, air raids by Israeli recently struck camps including Maghazi, killing several Palestinians. Mediators warned that the ceasefire is at a critical moment. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts for a lasting peace, including a planned second phase under a US-brokered agreement, are still unresolved. News is very clear. I just want to know from you, is the current ceasefire sustainable, or it is just a temporary pause before renewed fighting?
Well, I think we've already passed the stage of when you would expect the combatants to be ceasing their fire. Israel has continued unabated to its attacks on Hamas and on the civilian population. Part of it in the north has now been abated, but there's no question that they do not respect international law and do not respect their signature on a document that supposedly guarantees ceasefire. So, I mean, what's interesting about this conversation today, it's like we're dealing with the Psychopaths Hall of Fame. Netanyahu, Putin, Modi, Maduro. I mean, we're dealing with places in the population that are all psychopaths.
I beg your pardon, why didn't you name the Washington's gentleman, Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, actually, he's the king. You never attack the king. But I mean, all of it is sort of encroaching the people using power to advance their objectives without any kind of conscious attention to human frailties and human needs. Starvation, bombing, freezing, all of these things are being done in the name of these countries that are trying to advance their objectives. And oftentimes when we talk about Gaza, we miss the fact that this is Palestine, that the same sort of crazy stuff is going on in the West Bank, and that Israel has shown no willingness in any way to lessen their attacks on the Palestinians, the Palestinian residents there. These settler populations are breaking that up as well. I think there's a chance that this kind of an environment is going to diminish the authority of the United Nations to the point where they'll become disrespected worldwide, because the simultaneous presence of all of these activities by psychopaths seems unable to be resolved in this community setting. I don't know what you think.
Sir, I want to ask you a different questions, which is often I have been asked by my audience in the street or in some places, that why don't you talk one thing? Israel got the license to attack any country in the Middle East. Israel got the license to kill anybody, any generals, any leaders. But if somebody retaliates, then world call it terrorism. Sir, would you please explain why judgment is two types for two nations?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize how clever Israel is at manufacturing information and using information selectively to advance their case. And I think it's also very important to admit that Israel knows that it has the United States in its back pocket. And that no matter what happens, the United States, Democrats, Republicans, Christians, Jews, no matter what, Israel has a protected status in the United States. And so this itty-bitty country, this little tiny messy country, bunch of rocks in the middle of nowhere, can in fact cause the international community to support it without any limitation. This has been going on since the Balfour times, since the 1947 war. All of the time, Israel manages to come out as if they are the victim, when in fact they possess all the weapons and do all the attacking. I'm sure that, 75,000 deaths in Gaza, okay?
Right.
In the Israeli press, if one soldier is injured, that's equivalence as far as they're concerned, and shows that Hamas is on the attack. The 75,000 deaths are wiped off the books, and that one soldier becomes the hero for the Israeli population to rally around and support. It's just psychology of being a victim all the time means that they consciously try to manage the news to make themselves look as if they are under attack, when they are in fact one of the largest arms dealers in the world, selling to European countries, where they have massive cybersecurity capabilities, where they are very much in charge of other aspects of the war machinery. But they are able to escape any kind of deep inspection because they manage the United Nations, they manage the news, and they manage the United States.
Sir, you have the experience to work over there in Gaza, in Palestine, and also in Israel.
Right.
May I ask you a direct question? The world is run by four kind of establishment. One is military establishment, military businessman. One is corporate. One is financial giants, and another one is tech visionaries. My question is, as far I know from the Washington Post reporting, tech giants, corporate giants, financial giants, they don't want any more war because they are losing business. But the military industry is booming. Do you think military establishment is more powerful, even combine the three other giants?
Well, it's certainly equal to it, and I think it may actually be stronger at the moment. I mean, don't forget, Russia's economy is a war economy. Okay, their whole survival right now is because they're producing tanks and bullets and guns and everything. That's their economy. They used to be that they were producers of agriculture and energy and other kind of products. They are now 100% focused on developing weapons of war. And so that is carrying them forward. There are no real indicators any place in the financial community that people are suffering because of these wars. Stock market is at an all-time high. Investment is at an all-time high. Even green investment is on an all-time high. So there's no evidence that any of these wars are having a negative effect on any part of those four economic pillars. But clearly the military are definitely benefiting. Russia is just, if the production of all of these drones is an indication of Russia's capability to ramp up these weapons of war and to use them against Ukraine with sort of unlimited effect.
I want to definitely listen your comments on this. War is a lucrative business. Peace is not a business.
Yeah, well, I think that's quite true. I think that war has built up this military-industrial complex. You may remember that Dwight Eisenhower, when he was sworn in 1952, warned the or 56, warned the population about the growth of the military-industrial complex and that it someday would overwhelm democracy. And so that was a very important touch point. A current touch point for me is to know that this continuing resolution for the Department of Defense is now $1 trillion. That's their annual budget, $1 trillion. So clearly, people are willing to endure the price of war. The price of this, if there is not a war happening, they'll create a war, as Norman has indicated and as you've indicated as well, Tupanto. So there's no question that that peace doesn't sell. The war is very, very important. But if you look at all the arms sales, who's selling arms, it's France. is selling arms, and Israel is selling arms, and so nobody is above this. I mean, there's no innocence in this engagement. I mean, everybody is looking at, if you're a production company, you're producing weapons of war.
What does not determine who is right, only who is left. Barton Russell, in war, truth is the first casualty, because in recent time we have seen how media engage themselves into war for creating narratives. Older men declare war, but it is the youth and general soldiers who must fight and die. And last one is, only the dead have seen the end of the war. War is what happens when language or dialogues falls.
That's a very excellent. Can I say one thing? Just real quickly, I want to just call out to all of the viewers here. You know, suffering is going on in Sri Lanka and in the Philippines and in Thailand. If you have the chance to catch up with those embassies and do something in the humanitarian sense, it'd be much appreciated. I'm very much interested personally in the Sri Lanka, where I was there last year. I lived in the Philippines, and I've also just came back from Thailand. So whatever you can do in a humanitarian sense would be much appreciated.